Really happy to have all of you here, see all of you here. I wish we could be in person, but such is the life we've been living for quite a while. My name is Chad Welch. I am with the Door County Partnership for Children and Families, which is a division of the United Way. It's probably the easiest way to explain that. And we are here to talk about dyslexia and what is it, what it isn't, how do you identify it, how do you, what are some warning signs, what do you do? And we have four, I'm going to call them experts. They're going to be very humble and tell you they're not, but I think they are. And I'm going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll move into a short video just to kind of spur discussion and move into some questions from there. So I'll turn it over to them.
Hi, I'll go first. I am Kari Baumann. I live in Bailey's Harbor, and I have a son who's 11 who has dyslexia, and I also am on Decoding Dyslexia of Wisconsin. I am one of the regional reps and on the organization committee. I started this journey probably about 3 years ago. And since then, I have learned so much about dyslexia and how it affects my child and how it affects adults and how to be able to teach a child with dyslexia. I feel like I've become a teacher along with just being a parent. And as much as the journey is horrible and sad in many ways, it also has humbled me and made me become who I am today. And I absolutely love everything I've learned along the way.
Thank you.
I'm Morgan. I am also a parent of a dyslexic child, and maybe two, but my second one is more stealth, I think. And but my one who was diagnosed in first grade, and he's now in third grade. And similar to Kari with the whole crazy learning path, and it's definitely something that I didn't know much about before having to do all of this stuff. And now that I am on the path, there's something new every day, and lots of tears, but also lots of joy too. And I'm in the Sturgeon Bay area, and I'm running the meeting, so I'm the one who's letting you all in. But that's me.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Jeanne Schopf. I work in Sturgeon Bay School District. Currently, I'm the middle school reading specialist. I work with all our students 6th, 7th, and grade 8. This is my 31st year actually in education. I've always been involved with literacy, and my world shifted 9 years ago when my own daughter was identified with dyslexia. So I wear a different hat. I wear a teacher hat and a parent hat as well. So I understand the journey parents go through, but I also understand the world that the teachers go through, and trying to be an advocate for kids with dyslexia in our community is definitely something I wake up every morning to do.
Great, thanks.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Marggraf. I am the Director of Pupil Services at Sevastopol School District. Hands down, my mission is to help remove barriers for kids. So I'm here as a public school representative to learn and to listen and to see what can be done to help all kids in Door County with the barriers that are in their way so they can be successful learners. So I'm really happy to be here, and thanks.
Thank you. One thing that stuck out to me was, and I was a former middle school teacher and then high school administrator. And one of the things that I don't recall talking about ever was, how do you diagnose dyslexia? So I'd like to start with that question, and maybe Kari, do you want to tackle that?
Sure. Well, for us, it came with a neuropsych. So we started out with my son has multiple diagnoses, but it started out with ADHD. And then he was red flagged for dyslexia early on. And then we went back for a second neuropsych and got the official diagnosis of dyslexia. Many parents struggle with where to get the diagnosis from and how to get a diagnosis, because a lot of them are told that like by their insurance companies or by other things that the school should diagnose that, but schools don't diagnose. They can identify, but they can't diagnose. So a true diagnosis would come from a neuropsych, a psychologist. Some psychologists can diagnose, if I'm thinking correctly.
Mhm.
But that's more of a medical, it's more of a medical diagnosis is where you would get that official diagnosis. Also, I think speech pathologists also can diagnose or, again, identify. When it comes to diagnosis, I am like, it helped us to move forward with the process. It helped us to know, it helped my son to know what was going on, but you don't truly need a diagnosis to be able to identify and to help children. So when they say, like, if sometimes the schools or other entities would say you need a diagnosis for us to be able to give the proper accommodations, that's just not correct. Like, you can identify where the weaknesses in students are early on and diagnose them, or again, identify them early and give them the interventions that they need.
Thank you. A follow-up to that would be, are there warning signs? I mean, there are common things to look for. I know, I guess that could be from a school angle or from a parent angle. So I don't know, Morgan or Jeannie, do you want to tackle those, or?
I can jump in a little bit. I just posted a link to an article on understood.org, and I've found that website to be helpful in both ideas of what to do as a parent, and then also things to look for or even plan for in advance, since I caught my guy pretty young. But it can be anything. I mean, you can notice things as young as preschool and sometimes even younger. So if your child has a hard time learning nursery rhymes, my guy was that way, where we would sing songs, and I have 2 older kids than him, and they didn't have those problems, and I didn't know that that was an issue either. So learning rhyming words, and then struggling to name familiar objects and using words like stuff or thing instead because they can't find the right word. Trouble remembering things in the right order. My guy is like that, where even right now as a 3rd grader, so he's 8, he does not know the days of the week. He does not know time. So if I try to tell him, okay, we're going to be having a play date in 1 hour, he's like, is that 1:05? Is that, so I have to use timers for him and just make like different code ways so that he can sit there and understand his world and space. In grade school, trouble sounding out words, confusing letters that look the same when you flip them. I've heard it described where we see letters like B, D, P, Q as individual letters if you're neurotypical and can read, but some dyslexics, they flip them. So they are actually the same letter to them. Think of it like a chair. The chair is the same whether you walk towards it from the left or from the right. So flipping those things, and there's certain things that you learn along the way, like make your bed. So this is your B and your D, make your bed, and doing it so that they can feel doing it and have, that's that multi-sensory thing that you hear people talking about. Other things that happen, they can have trouble sounding out words. They can have trouble spelling, don't often recognize common words. In middle school, they might read slowly. They can spell the same word correctly and incorrectly in the same assignment. They might know a word one day and literally the next day, it's like they never saw the word in the first place. That can be very frustrating, especially if you're doing sight words. They can struggle with writing assignments. In high school, they can skip all over the small words, especially when reading out loud. They can be seeming to search for words when speaking and might substitute words like saying gate instead of fence. And they often don't get a joke. So if you, the thing that happens with sarcasm, they're very literal and they're very logical. And so jokes can like just go completely over their head. The other thing I can mention too, there's a great book that I actually just checked out from the library, and it's the Illustrated Guide to Dyslexia, and it's amazing people. And I have to say, I'm actually going to buy it. But inside there's, it's very short words. So people who are dyslexic themselves and are like reading the giant book from Sally Schwartzkopf or whatever is like humongous. So, but sometimes people will read every third word. Dyslexia is different for every single person. So learning how your person sees it is, you have to talk to them. You have to ask them what it looks like. Sometimes words squiggle. Sometimes it's mixing up words. Sometimes it's the beginning of words. Sometimes it's actually how they hear. And just like it's not the eyesight that's the problem, it's when it comes into the eyes and goes into the brain, it mixes up. And it can happen auditorially as well as physically through your eye. So lots of warning signs if you know what they are.
Well, I think Morgan did a great job of just kind of explaining what you might see as a parent. As I reflect back when my daughter was beginning talking, I remember she would say biscotti, and I thought it was kind of cute. Helicopter. I'm like, oh, isn't that cute? Well, what she was showing me was she had a phonological processing disorder. So what was happening is she was hearing the sounds, but when her brain, and we've learned quite a bit about how the brain acquires language. And there's a misnomer out there, a myth that dyslexia is a visual problem. It's really not. So what happens is the brain hears sounds. And when the sounds come into the brain, there's a mix up there, like Morgan kind of said. The brain, rather than putting the sounds together where they should be, they kind of reorder themselves. And dyslexia is neurological. It's genetic. There tends to be a family history in reading difficulties. So when I reflect back at, yeah, there is some, my dad couldn't spell, and there's on my other side of the family, oh yeah. So when you start to really look at your own family history, you can kind of put the pieces together that, one thing Morgan didn't touch upon, just little things of fine motor skills of tying shoes and knowing left to right when they're real little. So the articulation problem is a real indicator when they're really young. Now, as an educator, what we try to do is we try to identify those phonological and those phonemic awareness gaps. And where you're going to see that, a lot of times they say your first place you're going to see it in spelling, and it really is where you're going to, because that's what's visual to you. Unless educators are savvy enough to know to assess phonemic awareness and have the screening tools in place, those things are kind of going to get missed until they get to a point where we start seeing errors in the spelling. And those errors in spelling are going to they're either going to be phonological, meaning like Morgan said, there's going to be sounds missing in a word. Okay. Phonological, just phonemes will be missing. They just don't hear them and they don't spell them. And then they could be orthographic in error, which means they don't really know how to spell the sounds. And then the last thing is morphological and errors where they, at the ending of sounds, like they might put T at the end for ED, like I talked, and rather than putting an ED, they'll put a T. So those are kind of the things that we see in the classroom that are indicators of a delayed reading. Doesn't mean they have dyslexia, not necessarily, because we also have to look at other factors such as rapid automatic naming. How quickly does their brain process language? We also want to look at their working memory. And I think a very important thing that we have to consider, particularly as kids get into the later elementary years, is we're looking at, did they have structured literacy? Did they have a reading in which it was systematic, explicit, and phonological awareness, and phonics and spelling and decoding? Because that's definitely a promotive factor that they had that. So if they didn't have that kind of early literacy experience, It might just be the fact that they weren't taught how to spell. They weren't really taught how to manipulate sounds. So we have to really dive in deep when we see those red flags to figure out, is it something we call dyslexia, or is it really something that is neurological in fashion? And if we do identify these kids early, like early kindergarten, first grade, 65 to 90% of brains can be normalized, and there'll be no such thing as dyslexia. So
I would throw out there, the reading gets fixed and it gets faster, but dyslexia is lifelong, and it's more than just reading. So the repetition helps in everything too, but it can be overcome from a reading standpoint, but it doesn't solve it per se.
well, I'm just saying, according to research, Patricia Mathis, maybe you should kind of look into her as far as her work. I mean, the brain can normalize and there'll be no, but that's the problem though, if we don't identify it early. So.
Melissa, do you have anything to add? As pupil services, you kind of get the whole range from kindergarten to high school. It's kind of a unique perspective.
Well, it's a unique perspective, you know, but it's one that, you know, and in my experience and what I have seen in this, you know, the position that I'm in now is I see students with basic reading skills that aren't really diagnosed to the level that Morgan and Kari and Jeanne have talked about. So, you know, the information that I will get is, you know, more vague. You know, and from what I take from this conversation and being a part of this panel is that there needs to be more diagnostic interventions that need to happen to be able to quickly identify what kids need. So, you know, I'm looking at, and then as far as schools go, you know, Jeanne had said it, you know, we look at students, you know, and we look at a specific learning disability. And that's where students who have dyslexia, that's where they can get the support that they need. But the language just looks different. And I think that that makes it really confusing to parents and also to school officials. But I'm very hopeful, number one, by being a part of this panel and learning, is that we demystify that. And because the goal is to get kids the services that they need and the interventions that they need. So, you know, they feel successful. And they have a high self-esteem, and they know that they're capable of doing anything that they want to do.
Thank you. I heard the other day, I was talking with a teacher in my daughter's district here, and he said, well, the most common reason a child's going to struggle with spelling and then written expression and eventually, in his words, hit the wall in reading development by third grade would be dyslexia. And I guess I've never heard that before, and I'll throw that out to that. It feels to me like a pretty bold statement, but then when you watch that video where 1 in 5 people may suffer from some form of dyslexia, maybe that's not such a bold statement. Kari, anyone want to jump in, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, as an educator, what happens when kids get beyond second grade is they encounter all these multisyllabic words. And I think that's what they mean by hitting the wall. They're not able to decode polysyllabic words. And if they hadn't had a systematic, explicit approach where phonemes were taught, graphemes were taught, the syllable types were taught in an explicit manner and sequential manner. Yes, when they get to third grade, they're not going to have the skill set to attack those multisyllabic words, and they're going to guess, they're going to skip, and thus that's where you tend to see a great drop in comprehension, because they don't know how to decode the words that are in front of them. And if they're not taught to decode, they're not going to be able to decode a multisyllabic word. I think 65% of multisyllabic words have closed syllables. And so if kids are taught syllable types in a one syllable word and taught how to decode multiple syllable words, then there'll be less of a problem of hitting the wall, per se.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I do agree with Jeannie on that. I also would add that for my son, I mean, there was a wall even before third grade. I mean, he was just so severe that it wasn't there. I mean, we saw a wall. I saw a wall way before that. But I think the problem is that, like Jeannie had mentioned before about, well, what she called as dyslexia, is that when kids aren't taught those baseline needed fundamentation to be able to pronounce a word and the phonics that goes along with it, they're going to struggle from day one. Many kids can memorize words, or like we're taught with whole language, we can see a word, know that that's what that word was, and recall that word numerous times, where dyslexic kids can't. So they lose out. There's only a certain capacity in their brain to hold on to that information to be able to move forward. And I do believe that even with a very strong reader, if you don't have that foundation of reading, even when you get to middle school, even when you get to high school, you're still going to struggle with reading. Your brain isn't going to have the capacity to like, the muscles are going to be weak, and it's going to be slower, and you're going to be harder. You're going to also show harder time reading at that stage too, because you don't have that strong foundation of reading. So right now, here in our house, I have a good example of that. I have a very dyslexic child, and I have a child who's not dyslexic, but he shows tendencies of being dyslexic because he has not been given that foundation of reading. Now with Gibraltar, they have incorporated that new teaching, new phonics with the new professional development that they got, and my kid is now getting those strong phonics, and I am seeing huge growth in my youngest one, who is not dyslexic. He's reading faster, he's catching on quicker, he can decode, he can do all of that. So a lot of times some kids could be labeled as dyslexic, but they're truly they just have weak phonetic skills. So some of them might hit that wall, but it's all the same teaching when it comes to being able to help a dyslexic. It has to be science of reading based and structured literacy.
I'd say too, in third grade, the difference is it's the whole learning to read and then reading to learn that happens at third grade level. So you stop getting taught how to read, and now it's here's multiple paragraphs to take in information and answer this multiple choice question. So that starts in third grade. And so that's when people notice, oh, little Susie doesn't know what that means. So I think you notice it then because it's a bigger change.
And just to add on to what Morgan said, I completely agree. And that's what we tell parents and our teachers, all of the time. When it's third grade, it's different. There's an expectation that those skills are there. There's an expectation that the student can attend, because the instruction, it's not to say it doesn't happen, but the foundation is not there anymore. So I think when I saw hitting the wall and some of the potential questions, that's what I thought of right away. The other thing that I thought of too is I thought about the student, but then Kari, you had said too, that you noticed that much earlier with your son. And I think about a student, I don't have a child with dyslexia, but I think about a student's awareness to know that maybe something is wrong and maybe they don't know. And maybe they're aware of that by third grade, probably before that, but it's more impactful at that point. So that's how I interpreted that thought as well. And true or false, that's where I went with it.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's important to remember, like, dyslexia means word reading problems. And what's good for a student with dyslexia is it's good for all students. If you think about the simple view of reading, which Tumner and Goff use quite a bit in their research, word recognition is really important for them to proceed to the comprehension. And that's the word reading problem that all kids need to be taught.
Sure. Thank you.
Chad, I see a number of questions happening in our chat. I wonder if we could grab a few of those out of the chat to address.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I saw one more, and it says, being in a small county, do you feel like kids are at a disadvantage for services, or do they get more one-on-one? I'm gonna take that, if you guys don't mind, only because my job, I travel throughout the county, work with every school district in the county, as well as lots of other organizations. Door County is a smaller county, and I think that not just kids are at a disadvantage, but there are challenges of it being a smaller county. I think you can look at it as a disadvantage, but there are lots of advantages that come with it. I taught in Eau Claire County, in Eau Claire schools. I taught in Appleton schools, and I live in Green Bay. And I can tell you that Door County is a special place. It's not like anywhere I've ever lived or worked. So what can be seen as a disadvantage because of size, I think can also be a huge strength, that the community rallies around things as long as those items, those things are brought to the forefront. So are getting services a challenge? I think so, but I don't think it's because any entity doesn't want to provide them. I just think it's small. You know, part of what I do for my job is working with mental health for kids and getting services. It's hard to get providers to come to Door County. It's small. The pay isn't like Milwaukee, Madison, Chicago. So there are challenges, but I think that it's not that they can't be overcome. I don't want to sound Pollyanna here, but I think that there's a lot of good that comes with that small too. But that doesn't mean there aren't challenges. So anyone
Yeah,
else?
I would probably piggyback off that, being from Decoding Dyslexia of Wisconsin statewide. I have talked to many parents from not just, Door County, from all over the state. And I don't feel like I can personally say that Door County is at a disadvantage. Do we have less services or less tutoring opportunities? Yes, I would definitely probably agree with that. But as a school district, I feel like our teachers have more, if you want to call one-on-one or small group opportunities, than they would in a big inner city district. I think a lot more students are being identified as behavioral children in inner city districts and bigger school districts, where I think, Door County has a very unique opportunity to be able to understand that child more, because they're there with them and they're able to help them. Class sizes are smaller. So I would not consider us as a disadvantage. I think that it is depending on how much time and work and effort you want to, go into it and dig deep. There are so many resources that I have found personally in Door County that I has been very, very helpful for me, but I've also found many out of state and around the state as well. So I agree with Chad with what you're saying, is that Door County is unique in many ways because it is small and quaint. But I think we're lucky within our districts that the teachers have a little more one-on-one, hands-on with their kids than they would in an inner city district.
Now, I'd like to jump in too. I think that we do have the capacity to do the one-on-one. I agree. I think the question is, are we doing the right interventions to meet the needs? That, to me, is where I think that I can't speak for all Door County schools, but that is a question that keeps popping up in my mind at Sevastopol. We have the capacity, we have the heart. It is, do we have the right training and do we have the right tools in place to be able to do that? And that's questionable for some kids, sure, but for all kids, we have room to grow. And I think that's an honest statement.
I agree with you 100%. Melissa. That is a very true statement. And I think that's obviously not just Door County. That is, all school districts. But I don't think that the interventions are proper. I don't think that they're targeting children. I really don't.
What else do we have in Morgan in there? Other questions in the, let's see.
People talk about getting diagnoses and the cost involved in dyslexia. Speaking to that, I can tell you that aside from selling my kidney and my left side of my body to pay for my child to learn how to read, as a parent, it is extremely disconcerting how much money is involved and how many predatory different organizations are out there because we don't have the knowledge, we aren't given the skills, and we can't even go to the experts within our school districts to find out where we should go so that we don't get preyed upon. That as a parent, that's been one of the hardest things. And you can only do one big intervention basically, and then you basically have to sit there and hunt and poke around and beg and plead. So that I have found very difficult.
We did Linda Mood Bell, and I know Morgan understands this, and it was an extreme amount of money, like enough for a vehicle. And I wouldn't have exchanged it for anything. The amount of growth that my child made and the amount of information that he learned and the confidence that he got from that tutoring is worth every single penny that I paid for it. But it is extremely expensive to get help for your child. Just even tutoring. I mean, there are some places like the Madison has the Dyslexia Center, which is free, but if there's a 3-year waiting list to get into those. A lot of them that are offered, 3 years is going to be too long to have to wait.
And I think that part of, as I'm reading the chats, there's folks from all over the state in here, which is wonderful. Part of the challenge, there's a will. Obviously, resources are always, whether that be from a personal perspective or district-wide, county-wide, statewide, whatever. The groups like this are where maybe it begins, where we talk about how do we best advocate for kids, whether that be as a classroom teacher, whether that be as a parent, or I think to truly solve those problems, it's going to have to be a team effort. I don't think one can do without the other, and I don't see that. Cost is a barrier with a lot of things, unfortunately, and insurance isn't always a friend either for a lot of things. So I hope that out of groups like this, it starts the conversation. How do we best address this as a county, as a state, as parents, as teachers, whatever. And I wish I had a simple answer, but I don't think there is a simple answer, at least not yet.
Well, I like one of the comments that was in the chat about a teacher who's frustrated on a regular basis that when that she sees students who are struggling and they show signs of dyslexia, and then she's just told to wait and see. I think what it comes down to is teacher training, district training, administration training, DPI training. It needs to go to the top. Like this is something that needs to change across the board, and that may start with legislation. That may start with Wisconsin starting in placing new laws. It's unique in Wisconsin that education becomes a bipartisan issue. I've seen that many times, and when you have 40% of your or 60% of your students, your kids struggling to read, and they still think that everything is hunky-dory and that we're doing okay. You've got legislators and people saying that well, they're just surpassing us, but we're not getting any worse. Well, there's an issue there, and it needs to come from leadership. I mean, laws have to come down and make changes so that districts can change and that they're forced to change, because no one's holding anybody accountable. It's just the kids just keep getting brushed under the rug.
This is Kimberly, and I just want to echo what Kari's saying. So what happens is kids fall through the cracks. Parents have to wait, and the kids fail. Parents get frustrated, the kids get frustrated, and all of that turns into behavioral. And then where do they go? The school to prison pipeline. Both of my boys have been criminalized for their disabilities, and one is severely dyslexic, and it just snowballs. We need our kids to be taxpayers. We need them to be employed. We need them to be independent. We need to be self-sufficient. And if you're not a reader, or if you're going to jail, how are we going to sustain the next generation? It really just it snowballs. And these root causes, which, you know, if you're not able to read, your world is very, very closed. Your independence, I mean, just getting from to to fro, just making a cake, just, you know, reading the directions on a pack of Hamburger Helper. I mean, it is just, it's not fair. It's not fair. Our educational achievement gap, we're at the 48th. We're at the bottom. Mm-hmm. For Black and brown children and children with disabilities. The graduation rates are just 67%. That's not good enough. We need to do better.
Yeah.
I do have to make one quick comment about one of the things that were said in the chat again, that the state's working on a dyslexia guidebook. I've been watching closely, and I have many friends that are in that guidebook committee meetings, and that a lot of districts think that this guidebook is going to come down and it's going to change districts. But to be honest with you, it's not. The guidebook it has no teeth. It has no skin in the game. It really is just what it is. It's just a guidebook that hopefully districts will take in, they will read, and they will do something about it and make changes on their own. But it's not what people think it is. I was part of fighting for the guidebook, and I'm proud that I have done that. And I'm proud that I was able to stand up and fight for us, because Wisconsin had no laws or nothing in place for dyslexia. So I would never state that it was for nothing, because it's a step forward. But please, as a parent, don't just sit back and think that this guidebook is coming in and it's going to make changes and it's going to change your district, because you as the parent are the ones that are going to be making the changes in your district. The more you push, the more you call out your district, the more you get your kid's story out there, and you tell your stories. That's what's going to make changes in districts. And I have to say that's exactly what I have done with my son, is his story's out there, and we go to school board meetings and we make a stink. And you know, my favorite saying is, you're not doing it right if you're making friends and you're not pissing somebody off along the way. So
I've been watching, I think I'm keeping up with the questions in the chat box. But I did want to, according to my clock, and Morgan, I don't know if our clocks are different. We've got about mine says 8 minutes left. Are we jiving, or?
I got 15 till 7, but.
Oh, okay. Very good.
My phone says 6:50, so 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add on some of the things that Kari was talking about. A lot of schools will just decide to adopt a program or adopt an intervention, and that's all well and good, but it still comes down to teacher training. Teachers have to have the knowledge on how kids learn to read. There's not one required class in any college that young ed teachers need to take on language, on our English language and how our language works. And there's not one coursework on the science of reading in the state of Wisconsin. There isn't anything. Any 316, 317 license in the state of Wisconsin, there isn't anything that addresses how to teach kids to read. And until really that truly happens, that teachers have the knowledge to know how to teach kids, this is going to continue to be a challenge, because like I said earlier, what's good for a kid with dyslexia is good for all students. When you have only 40% of your kids reading, 60% of kids need to be taught how to read, and they need explicit, systematic, comprehensive instruction on phonics and decoding and spelling and comprehension.
Thank you for saying that. I just worked with a teacher who, I won't say her name, but she became a parent through some circumstances anyway. And she, for 26 years, she was a teacher. And so her kiddo was not reading, and she did everything within her teacher magic wand that she knew how to do. Her kid was not getting it, just wasn't getting it. She reached out. She didn't know about IDA law. She didn't know about how an IEP works. She had no idea what a 504 plan was. She had no idea how to advocate for her child, even though she was a teacher. And it just broke my heart as a parent that I'm telling a teacher how to fight, like boxing gloves on. Here is the law. Here is guidance from DPI. Here's guidance from COPA. Here's guidance from, everything. And she fought, and she's getting what she needs. But it wasn't until she connected with other moms who taught her how to do it. And that's sad.
I would throw out there, I know we only have a few minutes left before 7 here. And I would just say, I know there's a lot of Facebook groups out there. There are many books in the library. I know in the Door County Library System, and if you have an info soup card, there's a number of the books that have been mentioned and that people talk about when you do your research that you can check out through there and not have to purchase them. And lots of different websites, the ADA, there's International Dyslexia, there's Decoding Dyslexia, there is a Door County Dyslexia group on Facebook. You now have all seen us. You could probably find us on Facebook and ask for a list here and there. But just know that it has to be you leading the charge, no matter how tired and frustrated you are. But there is information out there for you to get started and help. So I would just throw that out there before we have to close into our final video, unless anyone else has any final points for our discussion here today.
I would just say I'm very proud of what I've been hearing around Door County and the school districts and how they are embracing this and starting the process for a change. I'm proud to see, Sturgeon Bay doing some things, and Sevastopol, you've been here and wanting to make a change and talking about it. Gibraltar did teacher training. It makes me happy to see those small changes happening within our county.
Hi, this is Janet Larson. I'm from Waukesha County, a mom of a dyslexic child. I know a lot of the names and faces from testimony in Madison and Decoding Dyslexia, but my one question is, the United Way is somehow involved in this particular event. And in terms of trying to get the word out, I think there's all different kinds of methods for us 20% of the population. It's kind of that 80-20 rule that you hear about so much, right? It's us 20% of fighting mama tigers mostly, but dads out there too. How do we connect with an organization like the United Way or the Chamber of Commerce? I mean, this impacts all aspects of society, businesses and healthcare, et cetera. But how can we further promote a United Way connection and perhaps tap into that kind of infrastructure and audience to help get a message out beyond these dedicated educators that that know and do better. And this fighting force of parents that fight the same fight every single year. And the saddest part in terms of becoming a Decoding Dyslexia activist is that you hear the same stories, you know, on our Facebook groups. Now I have my first grader, they're coming into this. And, you know, I didn't know about that until my kid was like in 6th grade going into 7th with a lot of ancillary problems. But you hear the same stories over and over and over again. So somebody give us some insight on tapping into the United Way, and maybe Chad, that's you. Thank you for listening.
Sure. Part of what I've never experienced is in my time in professional education, school districts tended to keep to themselves. You never wanted to share your dirty laundry, as it were, out and ask for outside help. I was blown away when I began working in Door County that school districts actually worked with outside resources and sought, as Melissa began looking truly to remove barriers for kids. I was shocked because I just had never experienced that. I'm not saying that Door County is the only county that does that, but that's where I'm going with that, is that the United Way partners with the school districts to put on programs like that. And we've realized, as we talked about earlier, because we are a smaller county, it takes a lot of out of the box thinking to address the challenges that we face in Door County. And the districts have come to realize, well, maybe that means asking the United Way for resources that we otherwise don't have. Maybe that means parent cafes that we do, where parents can come together and talk about issues that are affecting their families. Maybe that's putting groups together of, you know, the partnership that I represent. We work with 45 different agencies in Door County alone, whether that be Morgan at the public library, or Melissa in Sevastopol, or Jeanne and Sturgeon Bay, or Kari. You know, it's a matter of making the effort to talk, and it takes time and it takes effort to reach out. And you know, for us and for me in Door County, it's been a shock, but it's a pleasant shock that there is this willingness to work together for the greater good. And I don't think that has to be abnormal. I think it just takes effort. And so wherever you are, you know, there's a United Way. And I think you reach out to that United Way and say, hey, what can you do to help? Here's what we're seeing. Reach out to your school district and say, hey, can we put something on? We want to talk about dyslexia. How does it help? Might say no, they might say yes. But it certainly won't go anywhere if we don't have those conversations. And that has truly been, I think, why things work the way they do in Door County, is because we have those constant conversations. And there's that collaboration among all levels, whether that be government, school districts, nonprofits, parent groups, that I just haven't seen. Like I grew up in Marshfield, it wasn't there. Taught in Eau Claire, like I said, it wasn't there. So it can be done. It just takes time and effort. All right, I like that one. Morgan's got that one posted in the link. It's the Facebook link. So we are out of time, but I want to thank Morgan and Melissa, Jeanne and Kari for their time and their expertise. Certainly their efforts for what they do and their passion. It's part of what makes it work in Door County. So I am very thankful for all of your efforts this evening. And to all of you that attended, thank you so much. This doesn't have to be the last time we do something like this. So we'll keep our heads together here in Door County, and we'll keep talking as we do, and see how we can continue to make a difference. So thank you, everyone, and good night, and have a happy holiday season. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Bye-bye.